Welcome to the 32nd episode of Podcasters, today with Paul Craig from Canada. Welcome, Paul.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So yeah, I'm a 32-year-old software developer from Canada, and I've worked for the UK government for 3 years and the Canadian government for 5 years, just about. And now I'm on a 1-year leave, so I'm between full-time jobs, and as something I did in my kind of spare time off, I've built this chatbot called TaxGPT to help Canadians with basic answers about tax filing.
Yeah, that's what triggered me, because I saw that passing by in an article, and that it was actually a really good article saying what you built. Then I contacted you because I found it really interesting, because tax rules everywhere are very, very, very complicated, and they tend to, with every new fiscal year, they tend to introduce a new layer of complexity, making it for the average consumer or citizen almost impossible to do it without making extra costs to do their tax filing. And this was also the case in Canada, right?
Yes, although I was going to ask you about the Netherlands. When I worked in the UK, I never had to do tax filing because I never had a kind of like self-employment or ran my own business. But my regular job, the income was deducted every 2 weeks, and then at the end it was like that was it. It was calculated for me. And my understanding is that most countries do that. In Canada, you always file every year. Doesn't matter how simple your situation is, you always have to submit a filing.
Well, in Holland, there's a few situations. You could just be on the payroll of a company, employed, and you have a salary and you have nothing special. You don't own your own home, so there's no mortgage, no fancy schmancy things. That's it. The only thing, your employer deducts the income tax, reports it to the government, pays it to the government. That's it. You don't have to do any filings. So if you don't get a letter from them, you don't have to do any filings. Then if you're employed and you own a home, or you have some extras, or you have capital, stocks or crypto or whatever, or real estate, then you will have to do tax filings. That is, by the way, pre-filled. So all the banks and insurance company where you have an insurance that has capital in it, the lenders, they all have to, even credit card companies, they have to, because it's like a loan, they have to supply that information to the tax department. And that's connected to your social security number. And that is digitally sent to the tax department, and they include all that, the way it is, the number it is at 31st of December or the 1st of January of the 31st of December of the year that you have to do the tax filing on. And as a freelancer, or an entrepreneur, it's even more difficult, because if you have a limited company, then that has stocks, but you don't include the value, but you could have income or benefits out of it. That has to be taken into account. And if you're a freelancer without like a limited company, then it's considered income. And then, of course, you have to do tax filings, and you also have to do VAT, et cetera, et cetera. And part of what they know, they try to fill in. They really try to help. They really do their best. But we have to admit, the systems in Holland are legacy systems, and they have a hard time. Our government really thinks it's a good idea to every year introduce new tax laws. And for them, it's almost impossible. We can't even blame them anymore. It's almost impossible to program that. I mean, now they have to do research for 2 years to make a plan, because they want to make the cost of living a little bit lower because of all the inflation problems for the population. They had a discussion, we need to research what is fresh fruit and vegetables. So they had a discussion if tomato sauce on pizza was considered a vegetable, because then they had to figure out, how do we lower VAT on the tomato part on the pizza? Well,
Hmm.
that kind of discussions we have in Holland, that doesn't make it any easier or better, to be honest. But so yeah, almost everybody um, who has some capital or a mortgage or of some kind or debt has to do tax filing.
And then do you use like hollandgovernmenttaxes.com, or is there like private companies that offer kind of like online sign-in portals to do taxes?
Well, you have accountants or administrative offices that help and do it for you.
Hmm.
You have to you can use their software to do it, where you download whatever the government has pre-filled or the tax department has pre-filled, and then
Hmm.
build on that, and then send it back to them through the portal of the administrative offices use, or you can do it in the system of the tax department where you have the pre-filled form,
Hmm.
and you just build on that and continue. It's actually I have to admit they're really doing their best, and with the stack they have, I think they're doing a whole lot.
Hmm.
They do not have a chatbot as we speak, and they do have trouble. They have like the text phone, and it's always understaffed, or half of the time the people are not properly educated because it's really hard to get good stuff. Also, again, we can't blame them here because you need to know so many rules.
Hmm.
Half of the time they don't know; they have to look it up or ask someone. And I think that's why I was also triggered by the article I read. Um, it's a thing, and including AI in that, it's a step ahead. It's showing us what can be done and how much easier it could be. And I think, and I hope uh, your government as well as my government will watch this in some way or form and see, okay, this is a way to make it easier for the citizen. I mean, I don't believe the government is against us or something. We're just, it's just really, really complicated, all these rules.
Yeah, so I'll briefly outline the Canadian version in the simple case.
Yeah.
Um, if you have you're employed, you have a salary, your salary is um, every 2 weeks sent to you, and then part of it is sent to the government as like preemptive tax filing. And then at the end of the year, you receive a form from your employer. It's called a T4, but the government also gets the same form. So it's a little bit if you don't have an account with the Canada Revenue Agency, like you'd have to sign up for one. But if you never do it, you get an empty kind of tax form. You can log into an online service. Uh, they're private companies that offer these online tax filing services. They're connected to the government. There's no government portal to do it yourself. You get an empty form. You get your T4 from your employer. You type in all the numbers you see, and then you hit send. If you make a mistake, the government will correct you because they also have the same form. So they kind of like compare what you've sent to what they have, and then they'll send, if you get charged too much tax, they'll send it back. If you pay not enough, they'll like send you a bill.
So
Um,
can I ask you a question on this?
sure.
Now, my automation brain starts thinking, if you have the data and you can correct it, why in God's name do we have to, why do you have to fill it out on top of that? Because they have the information. That's only if you're employed. You have nothing else, right?
Yeah, so they've introduced uh, a I don't know when, but they've introduced you can have so the Canada Revenue Agency is the CRA, probably say CRA a lot.
Yeah.
You can have an account with the CRA, and then if so, you can do an API connection that pulls those documents into a tax filing software. Um, and like basically the step they don't want to cross or they haven't is providing their own kind of tax filing form. Like you always are going through a third party service, and they want to. They're happy for you to see your data. They don't want the third party to see your financial information. So like there's kind of like you have to approve it, it gets sent, and then yeah, pre-populated. You can, they don't know if you have self-employed income. They don't know if you have capital gains necessarily, things like that, like extra things you just have to put in yourself. But yeah, it's one of these. It's one of the reasons people often feel like it's too complicated is because like essentially you start from a place of getting very little help. Although if you do create an account, it does it does at this point do a lot of that pre-filling for you.
And it's interesting. So what triggered you to build this bot? Because this was your first bot, right?
Yeah, yeah. So it's I actually worked on a project 3 years ago with the it was like a government project to see if we could um, sort of like build a like an automated filing solution, you
For
could
the
say,
government.
for the government for if you think about everybody in the country as a big pie for like a slice of the pie, where we would say like people with low incomes and kind of stable situations, so they haven't moved, they haven't gotten married, and they haven't gotten a new job. Um, so predictable income. Basically, if we were to say the information is the same as last year, it's the same this year. And I worked
So
on that.
so that was quick and easy. It's in terms of data.
Yeah, so it's like the easiest if you wanted to say we're going to automatically file, because there's sort of like you start from like totally empty form, you fill it yourself, to pre-populated form, you still have to look over it, and then you hit submit. And
Like in
then
Holland,
yeah,
like the situation in Holland.
and then automated filing is they file for you, like you don't hit submit at all.
You
So
don't
it's
see it.
just it's done. Yeah,
So and then it's fully data driven.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Um, and the thing there, I don't think we could do that. Like our project's goal was to just present a complete tax filing and say, this is what we know about you from last year. If you can confirm it's all the same, we'll file it. And then
So
if no,
so you only have to hit the button. Yes, it is.
right. And then if you say, actually, I've moved, or I have a new job, or I've common law, or I've gotten married, or I've gotten divorced, then you would have to like then you would say, okay, like you can't use this system, and then you'd have to use your regular way of filing.
Yeah, but as a first step, that's not bad. You make it for those people. You make it simpler, and those are probably also the people that have the most trouble with the lowest income. They have the most trouble doing this.
Yeah, and so part of the research we did, we have these kind of volunteer run, uh, they're called tax clinics, but they'll set up in a like a charity or like a maybe like a school gym or something, and they'll have some hours. They're not 9 to 5 usually, but they'll be like, okay, we'll do it on Tuesdays for 5 hours. And people can come if they have a kind of simple tax scenario, and below there's sort of an income cutoff where it's like you have to be
We have
below.
the same idea in Holland.
Yeah. So we observed some of those sessions. So we sort of saw who's coming in and like how does the process work. And we also went to food banks in Ottawa to basically to try out the prototype we had with people. So they weren't there to tax file, but um, we're sort of saying like this is the kind of audience that would be able to use this service. So we wanted to try it out and see like most people don't want to talk to you because you walk up to someone, you're like, I'm from the government, I want to talk about taxes. They don't want to hear it, but enough people did, and we got their kind of thoughts on it. And I think the inspiration for the chatbot itself was that during like we always saw that people are very intimidated by the subject. They're afraid of doing something wrong, and they think there's going to be really, really bad outcomes, like massive penalties. They might go to jail. They don't know what'll happen, but they obviously are at very low income levels. You don't have a lot of money to go around, and if you get fined, it's like a really bad situation, right? So they feel that the risk of making a mistake is really high, and the benefits of filing, they're not really sure what they are. Um, so what happens in the clinics is that people would come in, they would bring, their ID, their T4 usually, some information. They would sit across from a volunteer. When they come in, they feel like this is something I can't do or I don't know how to do. and then the volunteer asks them questions. So they have this sort of back and forth conversation, and then 5 minutes of asking questions, 5 minutes of typing things on the computer, and then they're finished. So then they get a little printout and it says like, okay, you're filed. You can expect like a refund of $1,000 and you should probably get it in the next 2 weeks. And then like your taxes are done. Thank you. And so people would come in very nervous and very almost like very low confidence. And then they would leave with everything done 10 minutes later. Just this like the process was really asking them questions. Where do you live? How much rent do you pay? Do you have kids? Where do you work? Things like this. People know how to answer those questions. They don't understand taxes very well, but they do understand their own lives. So that was the idea of the chatbot.
That makes a lot of sense. And interestingly enough, going to the actual consumers and basically testing, that is the way to go. It's the only way to get proper feedback and understand what happens in real life. What I find interesting, you triggered me. Those volunteers, is that organized by the government?
So it's a bit of it's a little bit tricky because there's like a lobby group that does tax filing software, and they also have like accountants, But so the government is always like a little bit like one step removed. They don't offer their own filing solution, and they're for the CVITP program, it's called Community Volunteer Income Tax Program. What they do is they almost like recruit charities or local groups, sometimes individuals, and they can pay them expenses. So they'll say like, okay, if you're in a room and you're doing heating and you have a printer and you're like buying the paper and the ink, like we can pay for those expenses. And they sometimes will have laptop, they're a big department, they have 40,000 people, something like this. And then sometimes they like get rid of a bunch of laptops and they will donate those to the volunteer group. So the government doesn't run them. They do it through charities and organizations like this. But the volunteers can be government employees. They can be anybody, really. Like there's students, retirees. There's a lot of folks who are, I think, accountants have to do a certain amount of community service every year or to
Really?
get certified. There's some professional credential that someone is getting somewhere in the mix that also incentivizes them. This is like the common that you'll see this.
That is actually a good idea. I've never heard that before. That as a professional, you do community. I know in Holland, for instance, for lawyers, they have pro bono cases and they get paid, but it's nothing compared to what they get commercially in terms of the rate. So that's also a form of community service. That's why you studied law, so everybody could, have a lawyer and legal representation. But for accountants, I didn't hear it yet, but very good that it's there. But there's one thing. So the government is afraid of data sharing online and giving people data. And if you go to a volunteer organization, you just sit there, give them the paperwork, and tell them everything.
Yeah, and it's really there's this kind of I forget how they say, but you can give someone authority to file on your behalf, right? So if you what is common in Canada, the government officially does not acknowledge or kind of looks the other way, is that if
it's like a power of attorney, right?
Yes, but there's an informal one that's really common. So if you and I were married, right, we could say it's legal in Canada now, but if I'm like more of a details person, I'm a tax pro, I could fill my own and then just be like, give me your data and I'll just do it on my computer. And as far as the government's concerned, you did it on my computer. They don't really know, right? But in a more sort of formal setting where there's like a legal department or you're a company or you're going to see an accountant, you have this thing called, it's like authority, I forget the name, but you can give authority for someone to file your taxes for you and to know your personal financial data. And in the volunteer program, there's this kind of loophole where you allow someone to do it for 48 hours and then their permission is revoked. But it's basically like to do it for the one day and then it goes away after 2 days.
In Holland, you can, it's a special letter from the tax department where you give sort of a power of attorney to an accountant to do it for you under your name, but you're still responsible in the end, even though they do it for you. You're liable if it's wrong. So that's but you got inspired for the chatbot, and then you thought, hey, what the hell? Let's build it.
Yeah, and I actually started with a pretty different idea of how it ended up. So I started with the idea that it's very like what you see in the clinics is this conversation, although it is directed. It's not just like, hi, how are you? Like maybe that's the opening question, but they do want to find out, like, where do you live? Where do you work? Do you have your ID information with you? Do you have dependents? So I was thinking like the whole thing could just be sort of starting from, I don't really know what I'm doing, and ending up with like, here's your situation, and you should probably file using, like, essentially, can you use the volunteer clinics? That's one quadrant, people whose income is low enough and their taxes are simple. The volunteer clinics are really good service. They don't have advertising budget, so they're really word of mouth driven. So people often don't know about them.
Okay.
And then self-filing online, the self-filing software is actually pretty good. But the thing is, many people are intimidated, especially if you are used to going somewhere and having someone do it for you, then you never really try it. So like there's sort of simple and complex. So if you're simple and you're below the income range, you can do this volunteer clinics. If you're simple, doesn't matter your income range. My sort of what I'd like to see is to recommend people to try it out, right? Like you're a good use case for the simple filing. And then once you're complex, doesn't really matter if you're simple or complex, you can always self-file. But if the idea is if you're low confidence, if you haven't tried it before, if you have like self-employment, running a business, rental income, things that put you into what CRA considers complex, then like at that point, maybe you are a good fit for like having a professional look it over so you don't make mistakes. Like your case is more complex than normal. So it tries to sort people into those three. Like, are you a good fit for the clinic? Should you file on your own, or is it worth going to see a tax professional?
So here you are. You've seen these conversations. You understand what is needed in terms of information to do the job. And then what happened? So you decided, okay, let's just get some tech and a platform and build it. Is that what happened?
Well, it was a little more prototypey where I was thinking like, okay, if I'm the recipient, like essentially if I'm the person coming and I'm trying to get information, does ChatGPT understand, right? So I use the ChatGPT, log in. Most people have probably seen especially if they're listening to this. But you get just like a chat window and you can ask questions, ChatGPT answers. So I was trying to get specific answers out of it. So if it could tell me my basic personal amount, my kind of income threshold for the province I live in, the percentages, and you could get it to eventually say that, but essentially the two main problems are that it was limited in it only uses data from 2021, so as things you
Yeah.
see like prices index over the years. And the other was that, so first it gets it wrong. And then if you say, no, it's wrong, then it says, oh, okay, well, then it's this. And so for one number, it gave me the 2-year-old number, so 13,800 something. And then I said, no, that's not it. It's actually different now. And it says, oh, okay, well, it's 13,000 flat, right? Which is just like, at that point, just an invented number. It didn't get from anywhere.
It was delusional, as a lot of people say.
Yeah, what is it? Hallucinating. But
Hallucinating, that's
essentially,
it. Sorry.
yeah. But so the problem you run into pretty quickly is that it delivers a wrong answer with the same amount of like confidence as a right answer. And so it like the things it was really poor at knowing about were basically it's not a calculator, right? So it like doesn't really know how much tax you would pay on a certain income. It doesn't know the thresholds. It doesn't know we have marginal tax rate. Probably you do too, right? But it's like at certain income levels, the tax rate on
Yeah.
the income in that band changes.
Percentages go up.
Yeah, so it can't accurately, it can get in the ballpark, like it's close because it's using data from a couple years ago, like it's pretty similar, but it's not actually right. And so um, so that's when I came up with the idea of like I actually know what the percentages are, right? I can just look those up. I know what they are for this year. If people come and ask about like a certain province or a certain income, like basic income amount, like I know what that is. And so I can script that part of the interaction, and then at the end, you'd go. The idea was that you'd go through it, and then it would say, okay, we found out your situation. You should file your taxes this way, and then at the end, be like, by the way, if you have any more questions, I'll take a shot at it, right? Like this is the ChatGPT API. And then I was showing friends, and my friends thought that second part was really cool, and so then before it was. Uh, I mean, the word release is a bit tricky because it's like it was up for a while, I was showing people, and then when I started getting a lot of traffic, it was after the article came out. So I think of that as the release, but it was up
What
for a few
happened?
weeks.
What happened when the article came out? How did they find you?
So I was uh I mean if you're talking about people are building and doing it on their own, right? It's like there's sort of a developer conceit, and I'm a developer, so like guilty, but you you're
Don't
like,
be.
oh, I'm gonna build something, and the people will just see it's really cool, and then like overnight, it'll just be like overnight success, right? And you do kind of move between building functionality and features, and then almost like promoting and publicizing it. So I was thinking about like how do you get like people to see this, right? Like how do you get, and one way is word of mouth, but word of mouth doesn't work unless you have an initial kind of like someone still needs to
You
know.
have to get some traction somewhere.
Yeah. And so the tax filing companies in Canada, like who talks about taxes? It's like tax filing companies, they're not going to go for those. Um, so they're like, it's sort of, if we think about the pie slice of people, like the most high value people are those who go see a human, right? So
Yeah.
they go from like, there's free, you can do it for free. The, like a typical business model is like they have a free platform and you can use it, but then it's like not that intelligent and it doesn't allow you to do like optimizations and blah blah blah. And then they'll say, okay, we have a $30 product that you can use, and it will. The gamble there is that if you use it, it should be able to use its like kind of intelligence to get you a bigger tax return because you've been paying taxes throughout the year. But if you say, oh, I get a deduction here, then you actually, your taxes go down and then the government sends you a check, right? So the idea is pay $30, we can probably get you maybe $100 back, right? So it's worth it. Um, and then if you keep going up the chain of value, then it's like talk to a person. So someone either checks what you've done or just like walks you through the process. And like those are the most expensive customers, the people who need the most service. And so the chatbot is always trying to encourage people to do it on their own. That moves you down the value chain. So tax companies are not going to promote this. And then
No.
government also will not promote it because it's like, it's experimental. It's also like government, unless it's like 100% totally, basically, if you read a blog post by a tax company saying, here is the here's what you should do if you're like a freelancer. Government will not have an opinion on that post. They won't be like, this is a good post, you should read it, right? They'll say like the only valid source for information is our website. And like that's how it's everything there is legally correct. And like everything else is an interpretation. So this is really like more casual. It's a chat, it's used ChatGPT. Like, so government won't promote it, tax companies won't promote it, but taxes are an important kind of event in Canada. Everyone has to do them. Well, almost, but and I started looking on Google News for
It's one of the
Canada.
certainties in life, right?
Yeah, that's what they say. But yeah, it's like there's obviously a lot of people who do taxes, and like AI is newsworthy. You could say like it's very interesting. And so I went into Google News and I searched for Canada taxes, and then people would publish like, here's new deductions this year, or like what to do if you're a homeowner. And they appear in sometimes newspapers, sometimes more just blogs or like influencers. And I probably sent 40 to 50 kind of DM type messages to people, and I only got a couple bites, but the one I got was ended up being pretty good because they put it was a national newspaper, and they put it on their front page, although it's a newspaper, so the front page is just whatever was published last. But they also did it, importantly, over a holiday weekend. So it stayed up for a long time because they didn't have like tons of articles. Like it
So
wasn't like they
you
were
were the
publishing a lot.
news. You were the news.
Yeah. So it was for 3 days. It was still on the front page somewhere,
And then
or
what
it was
happened?
in the trending section. So I got a lot of people. I got a lot of traffic. I got a lot of folks using the service, and it seems like the rough numbers were over the weekend probably 12 to 15, well, 12,000 visitors, we can say, and then about two-thirds of them interacted with the chatbot in some way. So it's only at the platform I'm using is typebot, and
Yeah.
it builds the kind of conversation. And if you just load it, it will start saying, hi, like, hi, I'm TaxGPT, blah, blah, blah. And then it gives you two options. So either like, what is a
We're going to
good,
show it in a minute.
yeah. So it gives you two options. And if you click anything, then you are like a submission. Like you're somebody who's interacted with it at all. If you just load it initially, like that doesn't count. So about two-thirds of people saw it, actually interacted with it. And then about two-thirds of those people go straight to asking questions, and about a third of people go the other way, where they go through the question answer part.
For a chatbot, these are actually quite good numbers, to be honest, especially if it's a first one. And you should get feedback, and then you start experimenting and make it better. So you can be proud of yourself for putting this together.
I also,
Did you see this coming? That you of course you send out the message and you hope and pray something happens. But did you see this? You getting this attention? I mean, you're in Canada, we're in Holland. I picked it up. I love the initiative because it's actually what's needed everywhere in most countries where taxes are complex, and so that I thought it's good to bring it out there so other conversation designers can see it. They can do this in their country too. It should be like an international initiative. It's like, okay, let's bring it out there for free everywhere, and make people's lives easier. And showing that chatbots actually can do that. They're not these bots that hang out there and give you the wrong answer. Especially in Texas, you don't want that.
so I definitely started with the idea that so our tax filing period, the first day possible to submit your taxes in Canada is February 20th.
Okay.
And I was thinking like, okay, I should really have it ready for then, but I didn't get it out. I don't really have a deadline. But the last data file is May 1st, and people really start caring about taxes in April, and then like the last 2 weeks, it's like it's
Booming
I don't,
business.
yeah, like when I was working at the CRA, one of the folks there told me like their busiest day is the last day. So it's just like it's a
the
curve that keeps
same.
going up.
It's the same everywhere, and what we hear in Holland very often, then the system collapses because there's too many people on it at the same time, even though they scaled it properly, etc. But the load is just too much, and then they extend the period with a couple of days for the people that got stuck in the system when it collapsed. So yeah, it's just the same everywhere. I haven't heard anything. I've heard new stuff, but in terms of the problems, it's the same everywhere.
So when I was starting to build it, I was thinking like, okay, this could be really big, and it could get a lot of attention. And then I probably so I was aiming for February. I had the earliest version up March 1st, but it didn't talk to ChatGPT. It was just the scripted part. And then I was getting some feedback from the tax clinics. They have emails online, so I started emailing them like, does this make sense? Do you like it? And from that, I got a lot of feedback about how to make the quiz part of it better. So that was important early feedback, I would say, before it hit a mass audience. And then I started I put it on Reddit, and then I tweeted about it, and then I tried some sort of personal channels. And I was like, on one of my posts, I got 100 upvotes on Reddit, but that was on the OpenAI subreddit. So it wasn't a tax or Canada specific. It was just people who think AI is cool, right? So it wasn't It was kind of low traction, and at that point, I would say I had about 300 submissions, like middle of March, like 300 people who tried, and like probably 30 of them are me, right? So they're very like it's very low numbers. And I had almost got to this point of like, well, I tried it. It didn't cost me that much, like interesting experiment. And like, obviously, I'll keep sort of shopping it around, but maybe that's it. Maybe we'll get to like a few hundred responses, like 800, and then that'll be it. So I almost got to this point of like initially thinking like this could be really, this could blow up like in some format that people like really like it and want to share it. And then seeing my personal like pushing it, like it's not really, it seems like my friends are like, cool job, Paul, but like this, my friends don't need this service because they're all figured it out. So it's like the people who I want to reach are just like further out there. Um, and then, yeah, once the article came out, it was a journalist who phoned me, they interviewed me, we chatted for about an hour, and then they're in Ottawa, so they asked if I wanted to come in to take photos. So I went in for the photo, and then it was published the next week. And so like every day I was kind of like checking, like, is it out yet? Is it out yet? And then almost like, well, basically if there's some big news item, it'll probably also dislodge me. Like, you know, President Biden came to Canada and like, I don't know, basically, COVID was a big thing and like there's the Ukraine war. So there's definitely like, this is
There's
something
always something bigger.
yeah, well, this is something they'll run. It's sort of on the conveyor belt, but then if something like bigger happens, then maybe it's like, we're not going to publish this. We'll just do the other one. So I was like, not sure when it would come out. I wasn't sure if it even would come out. And then like, once it's out, like, well, basically what's the response going to be like? So I had moved from like very optimistic to very pessimistic and then was like, I guess the article validated my initial optimism, but I had already moved to a place of like, who knows? Who knows if they'll even run it? Who knows like if anyone will even talk to me? So I was really like already being like, okay, well, it was an interesting experiment, but it didn't really work. And then it totally changed my, over the weekend it like completely changed my mind, right?
I'm thinking you have a concept here. It works. Your the users are happy with it. You get people are giving feedback. It's a good sign because if it's shit, people don't even bother to give feedback. They're like, can't be bothered. So that's a good sign. Do you plan is this to make money on it somewhere down the line, or are you like, okay, this is an interesting project, I learned from it, and now I can start a project that I can make money on? Was that the idea, or?
I think so. So I come from government where, most people's assumption about government is that it's like everyone's kind of slow and lazy and like using decades old tech. And there's obviously pockets of that, and the technology is very old. And I think there's a lot of excitement in government about new technologies. And what often happens, what happened with me, what I feel like happened with my project in the past is like demos. People love seeing demos. People love seeing slideshows. People love like engaging with new ideas, but are ultimately it stops before it hits a general release, right? You get to this point of like, are we 110% confident that everything blah blah blah, and it's a really really high bar to clear. And what usually happens is you have a new technology, you try it out, and then someone's like, well, are we 110%? And it's like, well, no, because we've never used it before and we've never tried it, and we just don't have like, and it's like the way to get that expertise is to release it. And it's like, well, we don't have it now, so we're just going to pause this initiative, right? So,
And then it never happens.
and then it never happens. So you do end up with very kind of old, slow moving stuff. And sometimes you're on a team, you feel like this is really innovative, we're going to do something really cool, and then you see the kind of momentum slow down. So it was partly in the past that I had worked on this thing and sort of thought it was a really interesting problem space, but then saw it eventually get mothballed. So I was like, kind of had this itch to scratch for a few years. And AI is really interesting, I think, like it's in the news, like it's not just me.
It's a bit too much in the news. I mean, it
It's
seems like right now, like our whole world evolves around AI.
Yeah. So I think we've seen hype cycles come and go. This is definitely a hype cycle, but I'm in the middle of my personal kind of 1 year leave, and one thing you can do during your year leave is find another job, work at that job, and then at the point of, for me, it's November, deciding like I'm keeping my new job, I like it more, or like I'm going back to my old one. And you can do that
That's
once.
amazing concept. It's also good for your employer, your first employer, that because you get to pick up knowledge from somewhere else and bring that back.
Yeah.
It's like personal development.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was thinking that, so you can do that once every 10 years. Like you can't do it every like 2 or 3 years,
It's a
but
legal thing. You're allowed to do that by law.
yeah, it's like a union rule we have. And,
Okay.
so I was thinking like, okay, well, I was working on a contract with my friend, like I've done that a couple times, but really I want to try my hand out in the job market. And I think it'd be really good to have like a demo project that uses AI to just be like, okay, because I think coming from government, uh, people's sort of bias against you is this like old technology kind of lazy worker thing, and it's like I want to be a little more like it's not like that. Like I built this AI thing, so I was
And
thinking
your
about it.
age suggests otherwise. Your
Yeah,
age suggests otherwise.
so absolutely, you want to do well in interviews, right? And so like I kind of look the part, better for worse, and I also think it'd be good to just say like for example, in the past I worked at another department, and we released a blog site that had like it basically had 4 pages, and it took 6 months to get it from starting to releasing it. And I wrote a blog post about it that also it went like minor viral. But the point I was making in the blog post was if you add up all of the words on the whole across the whole site, like 404 page everything, French and English, because we're Canada, you get to 4,000 words. And then if you add up all the internal compliance documentation we had to write as a team, you get to 39,000 words. So
That's a
it's like,
painful
yeah,
realization, right?
yeah. So it's like every time I write 10 words for this project, 9 of them are for documents no one will ever read, and one of them is for the actual thing I care about. Um, and I was thinking at this job, like like if I do this like 2 more times, I'm unemployable because I'll go to a job interview. They'll be like, tell us about some of your like successes. And I'll be like, well, I released this blog and it has 4 pages. They'll be like, I could build that over a weekend. And you're like, yeah, yeah. But for me, it was 9 months.
Yeah,
So
that's a kind of difficult story if you don't have the context.
yeah. So then you talk about like slow moving decision making, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, can you get something done? It's more like, that's more what we want in an interview rather than like, I worked at a place that sucks, right?
Yeah,
Um,
well, I don't think it sucks, but and I understand although there is a thing, I understand that if a government gives information or does something, it needs to be 100% complex. We in Holland see now the results of it not being 100% correct,
mhm.
and excuse my language, but the shitstorm you get in your in your country. And the problems, the damage you do to people, it's tremendous. So rather be safe than sorry. I do understand. Of course, you can go overboard because in some situations no one gets damaged,
Mhm.
and you can risk assess that and sort of whatever risk there is, you could mitigate. So there is something in between. You have projects that are too risky. You need to de-risk it until you're comfortable and it's safe. And there's projects where say, okay, what's the biggest risk? It's not that bad. It's it's de-riskable up to a certain extent. Just let's do it and learn because the gain of learning is much higher than the cost of failing or causing a problem, whatever the problem might be. And I think that's sort of the thin line of innovation and entrepreneurship, which is not very common in government, or it is actually there, but it's very hard to get it out there. You see it's hidden. It's there, but it's hidden. Um,
Yeah. And
and I
and
think
I'll,
what you basically did is bringing it out there a bit by doing
yeah.
this.
And I'll caveat that too by saying that uh, government is risk motivated, right? And like in a private company, it might be more reward motivated. Like, can we make money or is this a good service? Government is like, how can we get in trouble for this? So,
That's one side, but I also see, and we have to be honest, not all governments, but I also see governments, they actually want to help the civilians and make it better, but at the same time have to de-risk extremely because of the damage they could do. And it's a horrible trade-off to make. If you're in that position, you're in government and you have to make the trade-off. It's difficult. You never do it right. Whatever you do, it's wrong for someone.
Yeah. And so I think like it for sure. So some projects they involve a lot of personal data. There could be really bad downsides, right? If someone misses their payment checks and then they go to like a money lender or something.
Yeah.
For the case that I wrote about in my blog post, which was releasing a government blog, it was very much about the familiarity of open source and just using new technologies. And the risk of the blog, something going wrong with that, it was really like, what if there's a typo or who has access to write it or update it or stuff like this. So I think, yeah, there's different ways to think about risk. And but essentially, like if you are trying to be the most safe all the time, like you can end up in a place where it's very hard to introduce new changes because you just need to like work so hard to get very small outputs. Anyway, but we're not here to talk about that. It's like there's definitely a lot of rational people involved making rational decisions. I just found it frustrating in one of my previous jobs.
I can totally imagine and relate to that. But talking about risk, at some point, okay, I have these questions I need to ask. I need a structure. I need to put the people through a structure of questions. I need tech. I need a tech stack. I'm not going to build a platform myself. You probably would have if you would have had the time, but you didn't have the time. So you chose a tech stack. How did you go about that? Because you were new in this realm, right?
Yeah.
You never built any chatbot before.
So yeah, I built a lot of websites and like forums, basically interactive stuff with React. Like I've used it.
Yeah.
The chatbot, I started looking for I just sort of assumed there would be like React chat UI. And I did find one, but I found it a little bit like too basic. Without the little loading, the three dots that move around, to indicate typing. So I did a Reddit post of like asking if anyone's seen this. I got I got one answer. But it seems, so I was thinking that I would find some kind of UI toolkit that would allow me to quickly build a chatbot because chatbots are like all over the place now. And I didn't really find one. So then I found this other service, Typebot. And so it's like, okay, I probably want a wrapper for the site so that like the chatbot is ephemeral. Whatever it tells you, once you leave, it goes away. So I need a place to have a permanent home for like, what is this? Why would I use this? Who built this? What are the resources I would recommend? So I built the site, and then I found a design that I liked on like a kind of portfolio, like one of these like one-page site portfolios. Like here's a bunch of them, and then I found one that I thought was it looked pretty nice. Like I guess for me, it was really important in Canada. We see, I don't know if it's the same in Holland, but you get a lot of spam text messages in spam email, and often one of them is like deliveries and pay for the delivery, but then one of them is like taxes. It's like, oh, sign into this site and there's some tax return or something. So
we get it with speeding tickets.
Right.
We used to have that, and that you have to pay now, otherwise they'll. And a lot of people actually paid it with a payment link and everything, but then they get their bank account gets emptied.
Yeah. So people are aware that like there are these kind of scam sites that will try to look like your bank, or they'll try to look like the government site. So I wanted it to not look like the government site, but also look kind of clean and professional, like not
trustworthy.
Like avoid spelling mistakes, like the CSS should look good, and like a sort of designed product, right? So
can I say something, Paul? You have to explain me something. How does this government employed web developer or developer is busy with branding? You're busy with conversation design. You're doing all this stuff you have never done before. Basically marketing, PR. You're doing all of it. How did you go from, okay, it's a typical entrepreneur thing that, I need to get this done. I'll sort it out. All the information is out there. Let's do it. My compliments for doing it, but it's not very common. Most people sort of get stuck somewhere and then they don't. What happened?
So yeah, so I've built a few sites now that essentially lose me money, but I've optimized for losing the least amount of money. So
That's the first time I heard that one.
the first one, we were, when I was at the UK, there was like the government digital service. If you go to gov.uk, that's the main government website. And one of the things they had there was this big TV on the search. There was like a search like function that was a separate app, right? And so there's this big TV and it would show like page views and also like recent searches. So you would see them like kind of come in and fade off the screen. And then you'd also see like most visited pages, like things that would show up in the search, you'd click them. That was like the most click link. And one of the most consistently pages that was there very often was they're called UK bank holidays, but they're just like days off, right? And when I came to Canada, so GDS, the government digital service, has this very specific mandate. They're like building the main website, like everything goes through them. The Canadian digital service doesn't have the mandate. It's almost like fishing around for work, like who can we help or what can we build? And one of my ideas was, why don't we build the the holidays for Canada? Like that was always a big one that was in the UK, and there was basically no interest in that. So I was working on a different project, which I felt like was like going nowhere quick. Like basically, I was frustrated because the project seemed to be like a lot of stakeholders and like no progress. So in my spare time, I built a Holidays for Canada app. And the reason it's complicated in Canada is because we have a bit like the States, right? There's like federal government and then each province has its own. And so the holidays that are recognized, if you ask like when's my day off, it's like you have to ask where you work and then are you provincially regulated or federally? And so there's a bit of a like where do I live, where do I work, and then I can tell you.
So someone who would live on the border of two provinces, and one kid goes to school in one province and on that side of the border, and the other kid goes to school on the other side,
Yeah.
they could have different holidays.
Yeah, like the schools could be, yeah, for sure. And I do live on the border, actually. Ottawa is like if you cross the bridge, you're in Quebec, and this side is Ontario.
Okay.
But if and your taxes are based on where you live. So if you drive across the border for work, like your company charges you taxes from where they live, but then when you file your return, you say it's from
So
here.
you might get back, or you have to pay extra based on where you live.
Yeah. But for
Okay.
holidays, it's your company, right? It's a company decision. So you get off the holidays of the company, like where they are. Um,
That makes
so
sense.
anyway, I built the site and then I like I kind of thought like, okay, essentially once you have the algorithm working, like it's the third Friday in or whatever, it's like second Sunday in April is Easter or something like this. Then for every single year, I know the holiday because the algorithm can just tell me. And I'll just put the site up and then I'll just have it on Google and it'll work. And I spent like months trying to like how do you do SEO, right? Like how do you get it to move up? Like who are my competitors? So it was a fun side project and then now it is my most successful site. Like I probably get like 100,000 visitors and there's no ads on the site. So I just lose $7 a month on it.
Yeah,
But
but that's. I think if you compare it with what you learned from it, then the $7 is not much.
yeah, and it's also nice to see that it actually did work, right? That like moving up Google, I thought it would take like a month. It takes about 6 months, at least from what I saw. And then I built one over this last year, but then it was really this February. I was trying to push it. It's a holiday we have well, it's kind of a fake holiday. It's like a for fun holiday, like Halloween a little, but it's called Groundhog Day. I'm not sure
Okay.
if you're familiar.
No, I saw it on your website. I was like, what is that?
Yeah, so every year on February 2nd, different small towns, it turns out there's quite a few of them. There's like 50 different ones that I found, but they have sometimes a live groundhog, sometimes like a stuffed animal, but the ones that are the most famous of live groundhog, and the groundhog predicts whether spring will come early or whether we'll have a late winter by seeing if it sees its shadow. If it sees its shadow, it gets scared and it runs back into a hole, and then we have longer winter, is the
In
idea.
Holland, we use, I think, cows to predict the outcome of the World Soccer games.
Right.
Something similar. It makes no sense, but we do it.
So I made a site for that, which was kind of like basically it was like which groundhogs made what predictions, and then uh, with the Canada Holidays one, it was very SEO driven, like how do I move up the rankings? With this Groundhog Day one, I started trying to like how do I get attention, right? And it's very similar, like reaching out to journalists, like making pitches, talking to friends, and then I was in one radio interview, which I'd never listened to because it was at 6 a.m. I don't know if they ran it, but basically that one that one was on Hacker News for a day, like at the top, and then it was also on Reddit. It did pretty well, but in terms of like when you come to TaxGPT, I built a few other sites, and then I had sort of like how do you do SEO, but then also how do you get people to notice you? I'd been through those steps a few times before, and yeah, and really like people are suspicious of something that is like about taxes. They think you're going to try to take their money, or like either legitimately like it's I'm charging you, or I'm going to try to take your money by like scamming you. So it was like there's essentially no business model. It's just about like reach. And to do that, we have to look good, but also like avoid the subject of like essentially like it will cost you money. So I think it worked basically, but that
I,
was that
I
was what I
think
was thinking.
it's interesting, but we started this whole conversation where I asked, how did you pick the tech stack? How'd you go about that? Because there's a lot more tech out there, and you chose this platform. Was
Mhm.
there any specific reason you chose this platform, or was it just price wise, or easy to use, or
Yeah, it was ease of use. Like the basically I was thinking building the chatbot is 95% of the work, and then the rest of it is putting a website together and like CSS and fonts, blah blah blah. But it's basically static pages, and then the chatbot is the whole app. And
yeah,
then then Typebot I found it like just built the whole thing, and obviously it's not a free service, so it was like but I don't have to run it forever, or even if like I can probably scale it back down to the free tier and just leave it up, right? But it's like okay, if it starts to catch on, like I'll just pay for it basically. So it saved me tons of work, and it's really easy to go in and customize and change, like to deploy the app to change some of the links. It's about a 10-minute process of like changing it, building a container, uploading to Google Cloud, blah blah blah. But to change the quiz, like the words on the quiz, you pointed out the questions 3, 2, 1 thing. Like to change that, it's
yeah,
really fast. So
yeah.
you can like make a change, publish it right away. Like the next person who loads, they'll see it immediately. So yeah, I found it to be a really solid platform. Although if I was getting lots of visits a month, it's pretty expensive as it goes up unless it's sort of negligible for you.
Yeah, so in terms of scalability, pricing becomes a thing.
Yeah. It's like it solves the
But
problem
that's
for me of the UI for chatting, but once you get over 300 visitors a month, you have to pay, I think the minimum is $40 a month, and then you can have 2,000 a month. So yeah,
so
minus one beyond that now.
yeah, what all of a sudden in the last week of the month, which I wouldn't be surprised what happens if you get a huge amount of traffic. You'll be supporting financially the tax filings of your fellow Canadians.
It's true. So I reached out to the developer asking like, I don't make money, blah blah blah. So he's agreed to waive the limit for.
Oh, cool.
I basically like for March I paid for the $40 one, and for April I paid for the $90 one. But then if it goes above 10,000, you have to pay more. But we've agreed to for the month of April, it's okay. Um, and then I'll probably scale it down once it's made. And then I like people just go from super interested to zero like overnight, right? So it probably just completely drop off.
Yeah, but at some point the period is over where you can file the returns or do the filing,
Yeah.
and then at that point the interest is gone. But would you redo it and update it for next year?
I think so. Something I'm working on now is like as we speak, not during this interview, but yesterday, is the so I've been looking at the questions that come in. I've been looking at what the answers are, and then and then if I don't know the answer, I look them up, right? And so it's like, is it easy to get this information? Where do I go? Like, is it see our website or is it somewhere else? And I found that some pages on the government website are really good. And then there's a few other companies that just do these kind of like everything you need to know about freelancing, these kind of write-ups. And
So very specialized.
yeah, and what I what I'm using right now is it's using the GPT training data, but then there's often things people type in repeatedly, and sometimes they're new benefits, sometimes they're amounts that they want to know. And so I've like kept editing the prompt so that I can be like, if someone asks about this, the answer is this, right? And so I've gotten rid of a whole bunch of wrong answers or slightly, sometimes it's wrong completely, other times like slightly incorrect. And I've made a bunch of interventions to fix those. But the thing I'm looking at now is this like essentially like reading a bunch of pages on websites, putting them in your own vector store, like keeping them in a database you own, and then creating prompts that when a question comes in, sort of pre-fill a couple paragraphs of related information and then saying like, okay, only answer this question using the above like two paragraphs. And then if you don't know, say, I don't know. And so I think like the problem I have now is really trying to drive down wrong answers to zero. And then you could, if you control where all the data comes from, you could basically give answers that you know are right or say I don't know. And right now it never says I don't know.
It's actually funny that you should say this because without all the education that's around, you literally stated the problem that all chatbots that use large language models have, where it's not curated and we cannot properly predict the outcome. And as the model gets trained, the outcome might change with the same question, which is really confusing because when is it right? And you're actually, again, without the proper education, by learning, solving this problem in your particular platform, which I'm amazed that you get this done. It's hard, but kudos for you for doing that. And that's why I asked, will you be doing putting it live again next year? Because maybe it should turn into, hold on, maybe it should turn into like a social initiative where conversation designers and web builders like yourself, whether government employed or not, doesn't matter, bring this out there for the people who need it, like a social experiment or something, where, you know, it's not always about money. It's giving back or using what's out there, showing how easy tech is making it for us. You could even involve platforms for using it as a donation. Maybe it's even tax deductible. I don't know. I can imagine you would have like a foundation somewhere that does this, and then you can get donations to pay for the out-of-pocket cost that is actually there, or maybe the government even wants to sponsor it. Because this is, in most Western countries, this is a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's really the two things I'm thinking now. So basically it's like one step at a time. Uh, One is this like identifying resources that we can look to and will be updated and just like pull the data, use that to answer the questions, and then sort of do a side-by-side comparison. Like, here is the last 100 questions people have asked. If I see the answers and then try it on this new one, is it better quality answers, right? And so like that could improve the bot and then say, okay, we've found some resources that are credible and like we can provide better quality answers. I think the second thing, which I'm going to wait until after tax season, is just like there are a lot of submissions. Um, at last count, it's like 9,500. That's just anyone who clicked anything. So about two-thirds of them do ask a question, about one-third go the other way. Some people who ask questions ask just one and leave, most people, but some people ask all five, some people ask three, right? So just to, as a rough estimate, we could say there's probably eight to 10,000 questions in there now. And then it would be interesting to sort of group and sort them. It's like, where are people really confused? Is it self-employed? Is it running their own business? Is it, as my initial hypothesis, like low income audience? Like, so yeah, I think one side is like make the data better, make the bot give better questions, but then the other side is like, is there a more specific thing we could do? Like, is there just like constant categories of questions coming up? Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, that makes perfect sense. Maybe this is a good moment to show us what you've built, and then because we had a little experiment, you've built TaxGPT, but
mhm,
your government, the tax department, has their own chatbot where you can ask questions. Now, I played around with it a little bit, and that was interesting. So maybe we can do like a dual test, put them next to each other, where we just see what happens and we ask them the same question.
sounds good.
And where,
Okay, so I'll share my screen. Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
you
window.
put them next to each other, or you,
I was thinking, I was thinking to go between tabs, but
okay.
if
Then
that
you need
works,
to
yeah.
go in and out, so you share and don't share.
So yeah, so the
Okay,
this
let me say one thing, Paul. It's important that we always read aloud what we see, because the people on Spotify can't see what we see, so they
sure.
understand what happens.
So this is the so I'm on the chat page of TaxGPT. Um,
Yeah,
it says it's kind of like two panes, but on the in the chat window, it says, "Hi there, I'm TaxGPT, a friendly AI tax chatbot. I can help you learn more about taxes in Canada in 2023." Then it lays out two options. You can, I can help by giving recommendations on the best way to file your taxes for free, or I can help answer general questions about taxes in Canada. Which are you interested in? And so it's not obvious just looking at it, but I can. We've talked already that if you say learn about my options, you go through a sort of guided script that asks you about what province you're from and general information without asking for personal information. And then if
okay.
you go to asking questions about taxes in Canada, it shows you a little disclaimer, but then it will, you can type things in free text and it will send it through like the prompt that I have, but then to the Tax GPT or ChatGPT API and then pull back the answer.
Okay, let's try something. And I tried, and I think that's an interesting one. I asked the question, how do I file crypto? How do I report crypto? Which is not a nowadays not a weird question.
Yes, it's sort of
So
yeah,
it reads, okay, I will do my best to answer all your questions about tax filing in Canada, and then a disclaimer, not a tax calculator. Avoid including specific income levels or description or complex tax scenarios. Do not include personal information. Very good, you have that out there. A lot of bots don't do that. Questions and responses will be saved but cannot be used to identify you. Very good. By continuing, you are using TaxGPT at your own risk. And then you actually ask them, I understand, let me ask questions, or skip asking questions. And you hit, I understand, let me ask questions. And then it comes with, what do you want to know about tax filing in Canada? How do I file crypto?
in Canada. Okay, so I'm asking, how do I file my crypto in Canada? And
So now we go to Ask GPT, Tax GPT.
yeah, so it takes about
Um,
3 or 4 seconds. Um, okay, great. And then I uh, I thought this would actually show up immediately, but it takes they both come in at the same time, but it says, okay, give me a few seconds to
What?
think. And then the answer it gives is if you own cryptocurrency, you're required to report it on your tax return in Canada. The Canada Revenue Agency treats cryptocurrency as a commodity and taxes accordingly. You will need to report any gains or losses from buying, selling, trading it. If you received cryptocurrency as payment, it should also be reported as income. Be sure to keep track of the fair market value of your cryptocurrency at the time of each transaction. So if you got it in February, cashed it out, and then by December it's double the value, you use the February conversion rate. As this will be used to calculate. So it is recommended you consult with a tax professional or use a tax software program to ensure you're reporting it correctly on your tax return. And then it
I hope
says,
this was helpful.
I hope that was helpful. Do you have any other questions? You can ask for more.
The feedback, I sent you a picture of that. I would start with the message that you can ask me 5 questions, then you manage expectation, but that's just a design thing. If you go back up a little bit, could you scroll back up a little bit?
Sure.
Probably in the program you have, in the typebot, where it says, give me a few seconds, there is settings where you can set the time between how fast it shows the message or a message. There's like a delay or no delay. So you in between messages. And this is the answer we got from ChatGPT, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now let's go to the government website and ask the same question.
Okay, so I'll copy it. I can also
We
show
would
you.
assume that it would come up with pretty much the same answer because this is government information.
So the
Right?
Canadian one was released first. So I guess it depends. Like I know a little bit more about this chatbot than the general audience, but yeah, chatbots are pretty popular. So you might assume you would come back with something similar. So it's not on every page for the Canada Revenue Agency. If you go to their regular homepage, you don't see any chatbot. It's only when you go to, this page I know it's on, it's personal income tax. And then in the bottom right, you see one of these prompts that you can click. Chat with Charlie.
And then you see, exactly, and a little face of a robot.
Little robot face. And then as an intro, hi, I'm Charlie. I'm the Canada Revenue Agency's chatbot. I'm here to answer some of your frequently asked tax filing questions. As I'm a pilot project, I'm still learning. I might not have all the answers. And then the disclaimer, please don't include any personal information. I may store your questions to improve my interactivity. However, I don't store or use your profile information, past history, or other interactions. And then they link to a privacy statement. Type help at any time to get, instructions on how to chat. And then if you have feedback, they link to a short survey.
What I find very good about this is that they have the privacy disclaimer and they say, I'm learning. It's just honest. And then you have more empathy for what's happening if it doesn't go right, right? Okay, let's ask the crypto question.
So how do I file my crypto in Canada question?
This was a copy paste.
And it says, based on the information I've interpreted, are any of these questions useful? And it gives me three subjects. So one is, why do I need to file? Question mark. Number 2 is, what is deemed residence? I guess that's resident of Canada for tax purpose. And number 3 is, how do you split your pension income?
Nothing related to crypto.
Yeah. So it's very kind of dumb in this sense. Not dumb as in it's not like using sort of smart, what we would call smart features or something. I think it has kind of scripted answers. And then if your question falls outside of those answers, it's like tries to offer you alternatives, but it doesn't, like it can't on demand pull information about crypto. So if no one's like created an answer for crypto, like it won't be able to answer it.
It's not in there. They didn't put it in the intent.
Yeah.
And there's no scripted response or no response for it. The right answer to be, I have no information on crypto in my database, call your advisor or whatever. Or check the website, whatever. But if it's on the website, they could have put it in there. So this is an interesting one where you give better information than the government.
Yeah, I think if you used a Google search for this question, which I don't know if we want to try, but uh, if I here, I'll just try. I'll just say site canada.ca, and then if I do the Google search, there is a so I'm not going to read this, but there is a page called Guide for Cryptocurrency Users and Tax Professionals that's on the Revenue Agency website, concepts, blah blah blah. So it looks pretty detailed, but so yeah, my chatbot is able to provide information about cryptocurrency and the government chatbot doesn't, but the government does have that information on their site. And if you use Google, it's easy to find.
Interestingly enough, this happens in a lot of chatbots where information on the website is not shown in the chatbot, but it's just out there on the website. So and that's a matter of putting it there in the intents, or using AI to understand what's on the website and pick it up from there. But apparently they do neither. So let's try another question in both. You have more experience with the Canadian tax.
Well, let's ask something we think it'll get. So maybe we'll ask, how do you split your pension income?
Okay.
So I'll ask TaxGPT. And okay, so yes, I have another question.
Well, I would ask, how do you split pension income when a part comes from another country? Let's say you were an American resident and part of your pension comes from the States. That sort of makes it more complex.
Okay. So how do you split your pension income when part of your pension comes from another country? And it's thinking...
And it's not that weird because Canada has a lot of immigrants, right?
Yeah, and a lot of people do have, yeah, exactly. And a lot of people do have like income from the US, like some jobs. Like I was working a contract recently and it was with a US company, so.
See, but look at this. It actually, well, we're not going to read the whole story, but it tells you it tells us, we assume it's right, but it tells us what we need.
So it does talk about pension splitting. You may be eligible. If you're receiving from Canada and another country, yeah. In general, eligible pension comes from, so it talks about Canadian income. And then if you're not sure whether it's eligible, consult a tax professional. Additionally, if it's coming from another country. So it doesn't give you a lot of information about the other country part, but it does mention it and then say like you might need to consider tax implications in that other country as well and visit the CRA website.
But the question was about Canadian taxes, not about American or any other taxes. So it makes sense. It talks about Canada, not another country.
Okay.
Because we didn't prompt that.
Yeah. And yeah, and it also, if you ask about taxes for another country, it won't, like, it'll just, like it says, I only answer for Canada, so it won't.
You filtered that out.
Yeah.
Very good.
So I'll ask the CRA chatbot now, how do you split pension income when part of it comes from another country? So this one says, to split pension income, you must both complete this form with a link, form T1032. If you file on paper, this form must be attached to both of your partner returns and must be on the same...
reference. And no reference to another country.
Yeah, and if I click it, it's a page which has, well, it links to basically a paper form with a lot of, looks like sort of complicated calculations.
Yeah. I imagine if someone who isn't already not too good with the taxation looks at the form, runs to an advisor and please help me because this scares the living out of me.
Yeah, I think...
Well, I'm amazed that ChatGPT, even going back to 2021, is delivering correct information. And the government side is not, or a chatbot is not giving the information, period.
Yeah, it does seem like the thing that the ChatGPT is really good at, I think, is looking at big, like a very big, complicated explanation and then summarizing it in one paragraph in sort of
Yeah.
common sense, plain English. And so, like, this one will link to a form, like the government chatbot sort of links to the form and you can look at it. But I think the almost like the market niche is when people are starting to think about taxes and starting to get ready, but they might have a few questions they might ask their friend, or they might do a Google search, or they TaxGPT is like you can ask questions, you get sort of common sense explanations of what to do or what to look at, and then when you're ready to file or you want to go talk to an advisor, you have a bit more of a basis in what you're trying to do. So I'm not trying to provide links or link to forums, but just to be like, here's how to think about this thing you've just asked me, and it does that pretty well.
You know what would add to the credibility or reliability, and it's perception, but of your bot.
Hmm.
If you could get, and it can be done, if you could ask in the prompt that you use behind it,
Hmm.
text, if you would have references to where it got the information. So it says, oh, the government side or accountant XYZ. That would add credibility to, because we know you're not doing it yourself. You're pulling it from somewhere or you're combining information. So if it says underneath, I use these three links or these three references to get my information, then it becomes clear you're not making it up, or ChatGPT is not making it up.
Yeah.
That's just a thought.
And this is something with this sort of embedded data I was talking about before. Like this is one of the things you can do is say, here's some web pages and or some PDF documents, and then when it pulls the information, it will say, well, it can be configured to say, I got this at this site, or I got this from over here. And
Yeah.
so it's definitely on my roadmap for things, if not to ship it, at least to investigate it, see if it
Well,
improves.
it can be done. It's not that difficult. And if you go back to the no, let's ask your bot another hard question.
Okay.
You have a little bit more. You have three more, so maybe you
Um,
should explain why you limited the amount of questions. It has a reason, right?
yeah, so the reason is because I am paying for the traffic back and forth, and I essentially don't want someone to be here all day scripting out an interaction that is just like constantly asking questions because each question you ask charges money. Like it's not actually that much. It's at this point it's $8 for the month. So by the end of the month it'll probably be more like 15. But you can imagine if someone was here almost like using like a robot type tool that just asks one question every 5 seconds, it would just run up my bill and I'd charge like
Yeah, and
$300.
someone could play around and create a bot to do that to you.
Hmm. Absolutely. I'm wondering, do you have any interest in seeing the quiz itself, like the sort of back end of Typebot?
Yeah. By the way, it's very important. We're not in the business of selling software or wherever. We're not in business. You don't get sponsored by anybody. Neither do we.
Yeah,
We don't want to.
yeah.
We're just interested in how people got things done and what problems you ran into. So yeah, show us.
So I can show you okay, sorry, I've got to, so this
Oh,
is,
it's
this is,
drag and drop.
yes, yes, yes. So this is the flow of the quiz. So it starts off you can see the initial one. Hi there, I'm TaxGPT. I'm the friendly AI tax chatbot. So these are questions that come down, and then when you get to a question, you can sort of guide the arrow to a different
Yeah,
section. And so this top section is um, it sort of asks, how did you file in the past? And then so it doesn't ask personal information, like it doesn't know where you live, it doesn't know your name, but it will ask about your situation. So like, are you above or below this income level? And then are you above or below 65? What province or territory do you live in? And so it ended up being much more complex than I kind of initially thought, but when you start something, you like just keep adding on, and by the end,
I'm
you
so
got
happy you're
something.
showing this. You know why? Because a lot of people, consumers, see a chatbot and just think, oh, okay, it's a few questions. And
Hmm.
then they have no idea, especially if it's structured,
Hmm.
how many paths, and every path has its subpaths.
Hmm.
It has. And if you think about that, it's like, okay, all this logic is coming from your head and
Hmm.
needs to be in here. And if you make one mistake, it's all twisted. So it is. How long did it take you to build this
Um,
structure?
so it's hard to. So the first one it probably took 3 or 4 hours, and then I sent to friends, and I also sent to these tax clinics, and then I got a lot of feedback to change it. So overall, maybe like 8 or 9 hours but that's not like in one session. It's just like coming in and
I
doing like 10
understand.
minutes here, tweaking it there. Um, but so for example, if you make investments over $1,000, that's one way to get sort of off-ramped to say like, okay, you're more complex. So I'll just read one of those. So since you made over 1,000 in investments last year, you're considered to have a complex tax situation. You can still file your taxes online for free, but you might also consider going to a professional tax preparer like a tax accountant. So that's someone who goes through it and then ends up like not being, it's not a straightforward recommendation. It just says like you're actually more complicated than some other people would be. Um,
Can I ask another question? Just popped up.
yep, yep,
Of course, I just did a little testing. But if you go all the way to the end, you end the conversation, and you got all the information,
yep.
would you be able to get like a PDF with the whole conversation, all the questions and answers,
Uh,
and
so
then download it?
so no, like I'm not sure. So I can show you the back end, just like I can show you like one result, but so I can see, well, I can just show you, but you
Because
can
I
see,
can imagine if you go through all that, you have all the answers, that it would be a delight to have this PDF where you
yeah.
go, okay, let me go back. What did I answer? Was the, oh, shoot, I made a mistake. Or, okay, this was the case. This was the logic. I put it in with my papers, and that's it, or my computer. That's just a thought.
This is someone who went through, so again, it's not personal information. You can't
So,
find this
yeah,
person later, but you can see what they clicked, where they ended up, and it looked like well, it looks like they got halfway through
they
and then they're
stopped.
finished. And so my sort of solution for that problem was to all anything that is recommended through that flow um, is if you go onto the resource page, like any link that is provided as you go through this flow, uh, it's on the resource page. So you can come back later and find like this was the free tax filing links. These are some CRA links and some explainers of
Yeah,
what the things are. So you can't get your specific conversation, but any link you ever got, like it's on this other page. Um,
that's a lot of work you did here.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so I'll show you the ChatGPT part. You can see there's this one arrow that just kind of like skips the whole thing, right? This is someone who
Hmm.
says, I just want to go straight to asking questions. And so there's the disclaimer, and then once you're in, it says, what do you want to know? Um, and it makes a request to it makes a request to my prompt essentially, and then I call the ChatGPT API. And then um, something I also had to deal with was if you reuse this variable 3 times, it will just show the last question you asked, so you have to delete it and kind of start again. So then I created it's basically like adding 5 extra questions, or adding 4 extra questions means adding 4 extra blocks with 4 different variables each time, because otherwise, if you ask 5 questions, the only thing that gets saved is the last question, and all your others are overwritten if you just keep using the same variable. So it has to, it like, you can see question tax 5, question tax 4, question 3. That's just sort of like incrementing the variable name each time. Um, and then if at any point you leave, then you go through a final, like, it's not legal advice. Please check. before you kind of, if you're unsure about anything, please check with the Canada Revenue Agency or ask an expert. And then there's a feedback section. So if people want to write in some feedback, and then at the
Very
end it
good.
says, you can always come back later. You can find all the info I linked to on the resources page. If you'd like to learn more about it or get in touch, go to the About page. The tax deadline is May 1st. And then, like, thanks for coming. If you found it useful, tell your friends. So yeah, so that's the structure of the quiz. It looks pretty gnarly from the back end. There's all these like rectangles and arrows going everywhere.
Yeah, but I'm used to seeing these things. This is basically looking under the hood,
Yeah.
and this is where the nitty gritty is being done, and this is also where the mistakes will be made because it is complex and there's so much logic to it. Compliments, because knowing that this is your first chatbot project, I'm impressed, and I think the people out there who do this on a daily basis, they'll be impressed too. And again, if we look at this, this should be done in every country, in all by natives, locals who speak the language, and just as you could build teams to do that, and get it out there to help people. And I think it should even be like government sponsored, even though
Yeah.
it's not government. It's based on government information, but it makes people's lives easier. It's like a social thing. It helps, especially in bigger countries where, like Canada, where having charities do this, not everybody's able to travel there or the distance. Thank you. Yeah. What can I say? The article was right. And did it bring you anything else besides attention to what you've built? But did people call you or companies call you? What happened?
Yeah, so I've had a lot of people on LinkedIn. I guess you could say some are
Like me?
some are you. So some are just saying thank you. So they're like, this is really great. I think it's good. Like I'm an accountant and I really like the approach. Most people want to have a conversation or a phone call, and so I'm pretty much like open to almost anybody. Like sure, like I'll chat to anyone right now. And you and another person asked me to be on a podcast, so I've said yes to both of those. I've heard from a couple of government people who want me to do a demo. So I gave one demo last week, and then a second one this week. So we'll see. And then, yeah, I think a lot of people are sort of coming with a request that's like, hey, like I think it would be really good to build like this for some other aspect, like for immigration law, or for some other thing. And could we build like that GPT? And so I'm definitely open to chatting. I think for now, this can be improved before saying like you could roll it out. But I think it's not a unique idea. Finding like
That's not the point. That's unique. It's the fact you actually went out there on your own and did it. That's a big difference than a lot of people or there's a lot of talk but little doing. And the fact that you're giving demos in the government, and the fact that these large language models, they can be trained on specific data, so they don't do anything else other than give information they're trained on. So you use all that general data and then turn it into a niche database, basically, or a niche model. That can be done for different government departments. I think if your government would hire some people that are specialized in AI and AI training, and understand large language models and how to integrate them, you could have initiated something that gets to see different chatbots that are specialized. Although I would advise also to do that in Telegram and in WhatsApp, what have you, in order to make it more accessible on the road. Because if you do this on your phone, then it's not so much fun, because of the way it's formatted in a web page. But That's just and then if you have it in WhatsApp or Telegram, then later on you still have the information. You can scroll back and say, okay, what were the answers? What was the information? So even though it's not personal, just a thought. But I can imagine that is the direction you guys are moving in. And I wouldn't be surprised if I was your government. I would do the following. I would say, okay, listen, Paul, you did this. You had all the pain. You understand what it is. We'll give you a budget and a team. And we have 5 areas where we want you to build proof of concepts. You have 6 months. Good luck. And that's what I would do.
Perfect. Well,
And then just throw it out there, and then because basically it seems like without having studied about, on that subject, you did well on your own. It's a bit different working agile, but it's sort of agile working with the iterations and asking consumers. There was growth hacking in there, so you sort of went through all the steps without intuitively, without actually having studied them. And it's really interesting. And the same thing with the chatbot. So I think, yeah, you're a natural. Use it, and your government should use it because you're sort of employed by them, or you will be employed by them again after you have finished a year in November, right? Did I remember that correctly?
That's right.
I will do that. So they can call me. I'll tell them. It's like, have Paul do this. I don't know if they will, but you have my recommendation for what it's worth.
Perfect. Sounds great.
But yeah, and honestly, I also think you should. There's a lot of other platforms out there. Also, have a look at that, at those, because some of the problems you run into, I don't know enough about this platform, but they have some of the problems are actually solved in the platform. So you don't have to worry about it. It's a setting, or it's something you put in, and then you don't have to worry about it. Because the problems you run into, a lot of people also run into those. It's not new. But you went through the pain to solve them, which is good because now you understand the problem.
Yeah, definitely a learning experience. And I think, I don't know. I think for me, like in terms of what was the best part, I think building it and I was really impressed with the answers I was getting back from ChatGPT. So at some point I was like, is this even a good service? And then I tried out a bunch of like questions my friends had that I had, and I was really like, okay, like I think this can work, right? And then once I started putting it out and not seeing a lot of return or interest, then it was a bit like, okay, well, maybe there just isn't a need. Maybe this is not what people want. But then getting that, the article coming out, and since then it's been pretty steady traffic and a lot of people getting in touch. So I think, initially I was not sure if it would even work. And then once I at least convinced myself that, yeah, I think so, then the second question is like, is there an audience for this, right? Did I think it's good? Do other people think it's good? And I was, like I mentioned before, I was I was at this point of feeling like, well, maybe not, and like that's okay. At least I tried. And then in the end, it sort of I got way more traffic than I anticipated, and that's success. But I do remember feeling at some point like, I think we're done here. Like I think I'll just leave it and see if anyone uses it. But yeah, just like sort of pushing through that sort of almost like pessimism of like, well, it doesn't look like it's going to catch on, so it's fine.
You just described what a lot of startups run into.
Yeah.
It's because you start from a product, you think I have a great product, everybody wants it, and then all of a sudden nobody wants it, and then you start looking at the consumer side and talking to consumers, and then you start learning, I need to do this or that in order to get into their heads and get this going, and then you also have to have a little bit of luck, someone in a position where they can put you out there, and well, that's what happened to you. If you would be able to, if someone else walks around with an idea, not necessarily immediately about making money, but bringing it out there, if you would give them a short advice, where they say, okay, if you would have 1 minute and you would have to tell them in 1 minute what steps to take in order to get where you are now, what would you tell them?
Yeah, I think for me, it's like get to the product quickly and show the value quickly. So the ChatGPT, trying it on my own, can I get ChatGPT to work the way I want? That was really helpful in proving the concept. And then using typebot and not building it all, that would probably take me like a month or something to build. And having it, being able to put it together in an afternoon, like you can really quickly get to the point where you can demo to somebody, here's how the product works, here's how it feels to use it. And if I if I did that for a few weeks and then it doesn't work, it's okay. But if I did that for 6 months and it doesn't work, then I would be really, really upset about it. So I think, yeah, take the shortcuts you need to, try it out in as simple form as you can first, so that you can sort of validate that idea, but then also fail quickly. So like don't spend 2 years on something and then only try it out after 2 years. Like get to that point sooner.
That fail quickly is one of the fundamental elements of lean startup. Right? You have to figure out what works, and growth hacking, because failure is actually a learning moment. It's not failure. It's just, okay, this doesn't work. We need to pivot to whatever works. And if at some point you're done pivoting, okay, then it's called defeat. It's like, okay, I stop, because it's no point going on endlessly and building something that doesn't work. But in your case, I think you found that sweet spot really quick. And I think you're lucky. And at the same time, you did all the right things, or all the things right, actually both. Well, that says something. And I think you touched the right point, saying again, the fail fast, and don't be afraid to fail. There's no shame in that. Nobody knows. It's something new. And only the consumer is right in the end.
And if you have a lot of different ideas, I know people do. It's like, try it your best one, but if it doesn't work, it's okay. If you fail quickly, you have more time to work on your other ones, and you have learned something from it, right? Rather than spending like 2 years on one thing and it not really going anywhere.
And the other one is in order to fail fast, is bring it out there fast. So build fast, and don't strive for perfection. Because my worry is I see a lot of things happen, and people, it needs to be a little bit better, a little bit tweak here and a little tweak there. In the end, you're tweaking so long that by the time you get it out there, it's not relevant anymore, or someone else already did it. So, having said that, strive for perfection, but later. Once you get traction, then it's the moment to improve, and actually, then you're delighting your customers or your users. So, So thank you for all this knowledge and information, and being so open about it. I really enjoyed it, and I will follow you, because I think your government is going to call you. I have no influence there, by the way, but they will call you, and probably lead some projects in this field to see if you can bring the government any further. And I think you would be the right person for that, because you understand the government is there to help people. And that's what you sort of did in your own initiative. And kudos for that.
Thanks so much. If they do phone me, I know who to give them as a reference now.
Yes. Well, just show them the podcast. Is that you send them the link. You could send that in your application. Just send them the link to the podcast. Paul, thank you very much. And keep us updated. And if there is a next project, or a wild idea, let us know, and we'll get you on the show and bring it out there.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me. Thanks for reaching out.
No, thank you, and we'll stay in touch.